Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, and also the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. I can't believe it's December already. I don't know where this year has gone, but what a year it has been. And I can't wait to talk to you about it. This month we are dedicating to the best of 2021. And we are so pleased to have with us our sponsor this month, Sagetech Avionics and CEO Tom Furey. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Dawn. Awesome to be here. Like you, I can't believe it's December already, but I'm also very excited as your show summarizes all of the excitement that occurred this year in 2021.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. And I'm a little bit off my game right now. As you can see, I'm kind of in a hotel room. I'm in Tampa, Florida. I'm on location for some experiential journalism, so more to follow on that. But everybody out there, I want to remind you that this is live. So please drop your comments in the chat. Tell us where you're coming from. Ask us questions. Give us positive encouragement. We absolutely love that. And Tom's coming to us from Washington State. Is that right, Tom?
That's correct. Yep, right in the Columbia River Gorge, right on the border of Washington and Oregon.
Well, I got to get up there sometime. I hear it's absolutely beautiful, and they're lucky to have you there, Tom. So let's talk a little bit about your background. So I know you and I share the military experience, and I believe you are a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. So can you tell us a little bit about how your experience and that background has shaped where you are today?
Sure. Thank you. And I just have to preface, Dawn, my brother, who's a little bit older than me, went to the Air Force Academy. So I've learned to speak slowly and use small words to help you follow along.
Nice. Thank you.
I did. I went to the Naval Academy. Wonderful place, wonderful experience, great place to be from. And then I served for quite a few years flying aircraft in the Navy off of aircraft carriers. So really, I won't say that led directly to where I am, but it's had a huge influence, right? First of all, my love for aviation, service for the country. But, a lot of the leadership lessons you learn at academies and through the military are directly relevant to, kind of company leadership, servant leadership, making sure that my team has everything they need to be successful. And back to flying, I was flying very old aircraft off of aircraft carriers. So a super complex environment. And one thing that I found obvious to me, but not obvious to technologists, is the value in simplicity. Because there's so much going on in a flight deck. There's so much going on anytime you've got something in the air in 3 dimensions. So to keep things simple, to make it as autonomous as possible, to make it very user-friendly, those are lessons that we kind of drive home every day into the solutions we create. And a lot of that came from me not figuring out which knobs to turn or buttons to push while flying an airplane.
Keep it simple. That's always the way to go. And you talk about simplicity, but your products at Sagetech are obviously very complex. You just fit them in a really, really small box. I think the size of a card deck, a deck of cards, and you make it simple for everybody that uses them. So let's talk a little bit about Sagetech Avionics. Tell us about the company. Tell us, what you're doing with it exactly.
Sure. Just a little bit of history. So Sagetech Avionics celebrated 2 years in existence last month.
Wow, 2 years.
It's been 2 years, but our technology's been around for a lot longer, right? So we recognized the value in a specific set of assets from a company called Sagetech Corporation. So with some investors, the investors acquired those assets out of Sagetech Corporation 2 years ago. So we kicked off Sagetech Avionics because the things that we were doing as part of Sagetech Corporation, we thought were super exciting and very relevant for the direction of particularly the civil market, UAM, AAM. So we started the company as a carve out with a handful of people. We focused for our first year on certifying our MX-12B, which is our military IFF, Identify Friend or Foe product. I think you're pretty familiar with that. We got that certified by the U.S. Department of Defense in the beginning of this year, and now our team has been focused on certifying our civil transponder, which is a version of that, useful, certified by the FAA, while we work on collision avoidance and detect and avoid solutions. So it's been only 2 years. We've grown from just over a dozen people when we started to 3 times that size today. We've got some investment along the way. There's just our company, I think, like everybody else, sees the huge opportunity in the uncrewed aerial systems and in UAM and AAM in the future. So we're going as fast as possible and bringing as many technologists onto the team as we can to create more solutions.
Well, look, I want to back up, but before I do, I want to give a quick shout out to William West. He's coming at us from Woodland Park, Colorado. So yay, Colorado. William is a land surveyor. Thanks for dialing in, William. Great to have you here. And everybody else, like, jump in because we love to hear from you. But let's back up a little bit, Tom, and let's talk about the military side, because your company really, when you think about dual use, I think you all are epitomizing that. Obviously broke into the military sector first with the IFF, or Identify Friend or Foe transponder, the MX-12B that you just mentioned. But for those maybe that aren't super familiar with the importance of those transponders and what exactly they do, what IFF means to soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and now Guardians on the battlefield. Can you kind of just, again, that 30,000 foot level, what IFF is, what your transponders do for those folks on the battlefield?
Sure. Actually, let me start. It starts with military, goes to civil, and comes back. I like to tell we're transponder geeks, if you will, right? But it's really quite simple. Actually, all of IFF and transponders, as they're used in air traffic control, were developed starting with the British in World War II. So they could see on their radar that there were aircraft coming towards Great Britain or towards England, but they didn't know whether it was their boys coming back home or whether it was Germany coming to bomb them. So they developed some ways to enhance the signal of the radar return through a little box, and that ended up being what's now known as a transponder. So it started with IFF, Identify Friend or Foe, differentiating between a friendly aircraft and an unfriendly aircraft, or potentially unfriendly aircraft. That whole technology is what has evolved into Mode A, CNS, ADS-B, the things that you see every day in general aviation and commercial aviation and business aviation around the world, helping air traffic controllers recognize and differentiate between aircraft and learn more than you can from just radar.
Okay.
So now we go back to IFF, which has evolved as well. So IFF, Identify Friend or Foe, is like an air traffic control transponder. So air traffic control transponders, you picture somebody at LA Center, they see a radar blip. They have what's called a secondary surveillance radar. It's actually an interrogator. It sends out a signal. Their aircraft transponder replies with information about its altitude, its call sign, its heading, its airspeed, etc. IFF is exactly the same, except it's hooked up to a crypto computer. So the interrogator, whether it be a shipborne interrogator, a ground-based interrogator, or an F-16, is interrogating with encryption hooked up to a very secure, frequently rotating set of codes that are programmed consistently across NATO. And then, first of all, for your aircraft, if you're carrying an MX-12B IFF transponder, it has a crypto computer that's coded the same way. It therefore recognizes that interrogation. If you don't have the crypto computer, or it's not turned on, or it's not programmed correctly, you're not going to recognize the interrogation, not going to respond, and therefore be potentially seen as hostile. Also, if you don't re-encrypt and re-encode the proper way and give the right answer, that's another flag for the interrogator to say that you might be potentially hostile. And this is super important. If we go back to when our products started being used, so our first civil transponders were used in support of the Department of Defense over in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that was simply because it helped air traffic controllers see the aircraft. We had complete air superiority.
Right.
So if there was a drone coming back towards Baghdad International and we were using it to recognize targets or to look for IEDs, we just needed to see it. And 50 or 75-pound composite drones are really hard to see on radar. So we put a very small transponder on there. The world has changed since then. Drones are prolific. Technology is ubiquitous. So a drone coming back to a US or NATO coalition base could be a friendly drone. It could be an unfriendly drone. And they all look and kind of act similar. So you put an IFF transponder on there like the MX-12B, and now you can differentiate that that's your friendly drone coming home and you should allow it into the landing pattern and come in and retrieve it, or that it's potentially hostile and you take other countermeasures. So that's IFF.
Okay, so let's talk about the 12XB because it was really a landmark transponder. I mean, I believe you said it was certified by DoD in February of this year. So that was kind of how you kicked off almost your less than 2 years of existence, getting that first. And I believe, Tom, you always talk about SWaP, right? Size, weight, and power, and how important that is when you're talking about putting a transponder on a drone, because it has to be small for this to work well. So tell us about the MX-12B and how it was a game changer when you got it certified.
Yeah, so like you said, the MX-12B is the size of a deck of cards. Literally, it weighs 190 grams, so it's well below a half a pound. And it, for the first time, enabled the story we just talked about. It enabled us to put onto small unmanned aircraft, Group 2s or Group 3s. And in that military language, what I mean is aircraft that are, say between 20 pounds and even 300 pounds, right? Up until then, they didn't have the room to carry a cinder block, which was essentially what traditional Mode 5 transponders are. If you're at an F-15, you can carry around a 6 or a 10-pound IFF transponder that's physically the size of a shoebox, right?
Right.
If you're a 75-pound drone, you can't afford that size, weight, and the power that it consumes. So we came in with a product that was just as capable. The MX-12B is just as capable as any large traditional Mode 5 transponder. So it's got what we call diversity antennas. It meets the full power spec of the US Department of Defense. So you can fly with it on a C5, you can fly with it on an F-15, you can fly with it on an F-18, but the size is compatible with a Group 2 35 or 40-pound drone. So we had been developing that on our MX platform for years. We got certification February 5th of this year, and that was super exciting for us because it's a very complex specification. But now it enables the drones that are most frequently used for doing ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance out to keep our troops safe. It allows us to differentiate them from enemy aircraft, which we couldn't do prior to this year.
And not really to understate this, but my memory talking to you before, Tom, of this certification process. I mean, we always hear about, especially now with electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft and some of the certification process, even just for smaller drones that are maybe going to be beyond visual line of sight. Certification for a transponder like this, I mean, this took you a while and like thousands of hours of testing. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the development of it, it's hard to say for the MX-12B IFF because our MX is a platform. So it has a military IFF version of it with one software and firmware load. It's got a civil transponder version, and we're even building collision avoidance into or onto that platform, right? But there are many, many thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of hours, probably of engineering time in the development. We fully tested out through, like you said, thousands of hours of testing ourselves during that development. And then we take our final product, and in our case, we actually went down to the military AIMS office. And AIMS is an acronym of acronyms, typical military. I won't even go through it.
Typical military.
But they are the office. It's actually an Air Force program office, but that supports all branches of service for anything to do with IFF, whether it's interrogators, transponders, et cetera. And they have engineers that they contract with that literally observe you running through all of the technical specifications in a test environment to assure that meets the rigorous standards of the US military. So that if an aircraft's coming back, you now have trust that if it's providing you with an appropriate IFF signal, that it is a friendly aircraft. And if it's not, you have more understanding of whether it's potentially hostile or not. So that one took us months on site at the Ames program office, just running it through tests to show them that it passed everything. And it did. We have almost no deviations from the full specification on this little tiny box. I mean, how our engineers did that, I have no idea, but that's why they keep me out of their work.
Well, that's why, like, when you started out the podcast with like, oh, keep it simple. I'm thinking this is not simple. I knew the hundreds of, as you said, hundreds of thousands of hours engineering and testing that went into this thing. Let's transition for a second and talk a little bit about the civil side, because I think your experience on the military side has informed what you're doing now on the civil side. And as we both know, under Part 107 anyway, the FAA has said, hey, ADS-B is not going to be a thing, right, for commercial drones. So how is this MX-12B or the transponder experience and products that you have, how is that kind of dual use or transitioning over to this commercial sector? Like, what are you doing there?
Sure. Well, you mentioned the Part 107, and I was almost going to joke because I think you have, I think you're ending the year with the FAA.
I am this year.
I'm just waiting for them to drop another New Year's Eve rulemaking down.
Oh, yeah.
Last year.
Also, or Christmas Eve, one or the other. It's gonna.
Yeah.
Wait, if we're betting, I'm going to bet the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee recommendations are going to drop on New Year's Eve. That's my bet. Like, it's out there.
And you know what? It's funny how that happens, but we welcome it. Obviously, the whole industry is excited that the FAA is paving the way for widespread routine commercial use, right? But that remote ID rule, as you pointed out, it said, it clarified a lot. And transponders and ADS-B, super important for air safety, right? They are next gen. FAA's next gen is up there with ADS-B, so aircraft can recognize each other and avoid collisions.
Yes.
Very important, and even more important in the future when there are uncrewed aircraft joining the thousands of aircraft in the airspace as it is today. And when we get to UAM jets and land and everything's in the air, then it's a completely different story, right? But because of all those aircraft, the safety is critical, but spectrum, so the frequency, gets super congested. And so they clarified that aircraft essentially below 55 pounds, flying below 400 feet. So your general UTM, if you will, that space, that'll be managed differently than ATM, which is above 400 feet, aircraft that are operating under Part 91 and Part 135.
Right.
Our MX platform, which is a transponder ADS-B receiver built in, and we'll build onto that ACAS XU and ACAS XR capability. That's the collision avoidance and the transponder safety equipment for aircraft that are greater than 55 pounds. So rotorcraft and fixed-wing aircraft will utilize those to fly operations under Part 91 or Part 135 and cohabitate safely with commercial aircraft, business jets, etc. Below 55 pounds, won't use the same thing. We won't be transmitting on those same frequencies. However, it's still critically important to listen on those frequencies. So ACAS SXU still listens on ADS-B frequencies, still looks for that cooperative traffic, but that's through passive sensors. Because helicopters, for example, they are greater than 55 pounds. They operate often under Part 91 and Part 135. They live a lot of their lives under 400 feet in that airspace where drones are.
Right.
So that's their language they're communicating. So small drones still need to listen to that language to be able to avoid those crewed helicopters. So that 55 pounds and 400 feet is roughly, and it's not exact, it's kind of a gray line, but it's roughly the breakdown between transponding and transmitting on those ADS-B frequencies or just listening on those frequencies.
Okay, got it. And of course, you know, there's the, okay, I can identify there's something there, an aircraft, right? But then the ability to actually not just detect it, but no kidding, avoid it. And so explain how your products on the civil side are helping with that at the lower level altitudes.
Yeah, so it's essentially the same as the higher altitudes. The higher altitudes, there's transmitting going on for coordination, right? The lower altitude, um, we are working out on our products in parallel with what the FAA is developing, and RTCA, who writes the rules for the FAA, writes the MOPS.
Right.
We're on committees there and working in parallel with them for the collision avoidance schemes, algorithms that will make sense for everyone to coordinate. So the smaller aircraft below 400 feet, below 55 pounds, as I mentioned, they will passively receive information about other aircraft that are transmitting ADS-B. So they'll have dual band receivers there. But then also that's what's called cooperative traffic. So in our language, we have cooperative aircraft that are transmitting on transponder frequencies and non-cooperative that are not. It doesn't mean they're illegal or they're in a place they shouldn't be or they're doing something wrong.
They're just not talking necessarily.
They're just not talking, and they probably shouldn't be talking, depending on, you know, if they're flying VFR and they're not required to carry a transponder, or if they're a drone below 55 pounds, they shouldn't be squawking a transponder code, but you still need to detect them and avoid them. So there are, like, your hosts or your sponsors, I should say, last month, Iris Automation, there are radar solutions providers, there are acoustic solutions providers that provide sensors to detect aircraft that aren't transmitting on transponder frequencies. Our ACAS, Airborne Collision Avoidance System, accepts the cooperative inputs from ADS-B receivers, the non-cooperative inputs. It creates a single view of the traffic around ownership, around your own aircraft.
Okay.
And then determines whether the well clear buffer, and that's not our language, that's common industry in the FAA language,
Right.
if the well clear safety buffer around either aircraft is going to be broken, then it provides an avoidance maneuver to the own ship. And those avoidance maneuvers, right now, we are channeling them down through the command and control link to the ground station operator.
Okay.
But when allowed to be fully autonomous, those can also go directly to the autopilot so that the aircraft itself can recognize and avoid other aircraft without needing the direct constant oversight of an operator. And that's what will truly allow BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight flight, right?
Absolutely. And you know, we talked about the hundreds of thousands of hours for the MX-12B transponder to get certified. The system you're talking about now, Tom, you know, kind of applicable to commercial drones and eventual beyond visual line of sight. You're involved in some R&D on this, right? Didn't you recently successfully participate in NASA's SIO demonstrations?
Yep, we did with some aircraft partners. We have our ADS-B receiver installed. We're also installing our DAA as that is developed, our detect and avoid, through the ACAS computer on board that. I guess we could say American Aerospace Technologies, their Air Ranger aircraft carried our device and participated in the most recent round of flight testing, and it's been involved for quite a while. But the most recent flight testing showing the success and showing where things needed to be resolved in certain instances for successful integration in the airspace beyond visual line of sight, right? So we're very excited to participate in that. We also participated in, we had an Air Force contract, STTR Phase 1. It was our technology partner was the University of North Dakota Aerospace Foundation. We did work up at the Northern Plains UAS test site to demonstrate the low swap ACAS capability up there with crewed aircraft versus crewed aircraft. And once that proved successful, we did it crewed aircraft versus uncrewed aircraft. So the UAS had the ACAS and it successfully provided the avoidance maneuvers. But all of those, the SIO, the Air Force STTR, those provide invaluable information back to us for development. And we feed that also back to the FAA TCAS program office, so they can work on the fundamental algorithms for ACAS to make sure that they're reaching the levels of safety that we all need.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of full circle, because you mentioned, military, civilian, back to military, and that AFWorks STTR you just mentioned is one of them. But you also were just working with the Navy, with the Army and the Future Tactical UAS group, if I recall correctly. Tell us a
Yes,
little bit. Was that out at Yuma Proving Ground? What you were doing out there?
we weren't actually working directly with them, but
Yeah.
our customers do. So our customers that for years have been using our XP transponder, and cases are transferring over now to our MX transponder, and particularly for the IFF capability.
Yeah.
The Future Tactical UAS, which is an ongoing program by the Army to replace the Shadow, which is a great platform, but it's aging, is the first small UAS, and by small, less than a couple of 100 pounds, right? UAS program in the military that has a requirement for Mode 5 IFF. And that's really because earlier this year we certified it, so then the military could never put a requirement for Mode 5 IFF on small drones because the technology didn't exist. So once we got certified and the technology existed, now the military is free to put those requirements on. So then our customers, as they install our solutions, then go work in some of those demonstrations. So not our Mode 5 version yet, but our MX and our XP versions have been installed in each of the 4 demonstration and competitors, if you will, for the Future Tactical UAS, where if you recall, for I think a year and a half or so or more, they were out working with Army companies and brigades and platoons to demonstrate what the art of what's possible for small UAS coming down the road, and it informed that. And we're also installing our Mode 5 IFF MX-12B on the Shadow right now. So while that is being replaced, it has got a lot of years of life in front of it, because as you know, these military programs take a while to get through the acquisition and proving cycle, and then fleeting up to the quantities we need.
Yeah, a program of record, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're supporting the Shadow as it puts Mode 5 on, because it being a few 100-pound aircraft, it made complete sense to use the smallest full-featured IFF available. So we're putting it on there.
So I'm just going to ask this. So your transponders and these systems, are they baked in? Do they have to be baked in at the manufacturing, kind of point of entry, or can they be just included later? In other words, like plug and play, or both? Can they be both?
Yes, both.
Okay.
So we have a lot of our customers are the OEMs. As a matter of fact, predominantly our customers are the aircraft manufacturers, and we work closely with them through the integration process, et cetera, to make sure it meets their needs. And that's part of why we're very excited to get. We expect this month to be finished with our FAA TSO final verification to get the FAA certification on the civil version of the transponder.
TSO is technical standard order.
Technical standard order, and that's for those of my generation, that's the FAA's good housekeeping seal of approval on a subsystem of an aircraft.
Okay.
But basically, when an aircraft manufacturer is getting certified, they can prove the effectiveness of every single subsystem through reams and reams of documentation and test, or they can use certified subsystems to reduce that workload on themselves, because they've got a lot to prove on the aircraft, right?
Right.
So by using a TSO transponder, it relieves the aircraft manufacturer of the burden of proving to the FAA that the transponder system they put on board works. They just have that check in the block. So most of our customers are those OEMs, and we believe this FAA TSO will really help them simplify their aircraft certification process. But we do often find ourselves selling to either system integrators who are taking aircraft and providing different capabilities on that aircraft. So they're doing just systems integration work on it,
Right.
and direct to end users often. And that's why we like to keep it simple. And, we've created software solutions and accessories that make it really easy to integrate our solutions as well as operate our solutions. So, a very technical OEM will integrate it at the detail level and will program into their systems. At an operator level, he might just want to use our libraries or even our software system to just operate it over his command and control link while he or she is flying the aircraft.
Okay, awesome. We have a question and a comment from the audience here. So N4U Go says, do these help with autonomy? In other words, on the military or civil side, are your systems assisting in autonomous operations, or will they in the future?
I believe they will, and they're part of what will enable autonomy, right? So, I think for all of us, their nirvana is successful, routine, beyond visual line of sight flight, and ideally of multiple aircraft per single operator, right? To really gain the advantages of uncrewed aircraft. To enable that to happen autonomously, one thing that needs to happen central to us is you need to trust that that aircraft is taking over the pilot responsibility from Part 91 to see and avoid other aircraft, that the aircraft itself can detect and avoid other aircraft. So for now, they do not, this does not operate autonomously. So we put the collision avoidance on the aircraft. It will provide recommended maneuvers to, or commanded maneuvers to, the operator, who then needs to either allow the aircraft to do it or to perform that maneuver his or herself, right? In the future, that will go right to the autopilot, but all of this needs to be proven, right? What we don't want to do is put something out there, let it happen autonomously, and then find out that the algorithm was wrong and it caused an aircraft to crash land in a stadium full of people, right? Those are the things we're trying to avoid. But I guess, so that was a long answer. The short answer is yes, they do help with autonomy.
Very good, very good. And it looks like a fly girl is saying, "Hey, Dawn." So, hey, fly girl, good to see you. Good to see you out there. Thanks for joining us. So many things. Talk about this year, Tom. Like from the Sagetech perspective. So we talked about, you kicked off the year with the MX-12B certification. And tell us about the year that you all have had in 2021, since we're really focused on the best of 2021 for the series.
Yeah, we have had a very exciting and busy year. As you mentioned, we kicked off the year right at the beginning of February, so a month into the year, with getting the AIM certification for the military, MX-12B. So obviously we spent a lot of time this year with customers, helping them integrate that. We also, we're a learning organization, right? Through that process of integration, we've learned a lot from our customers on how we can provide the right accessories and software, et cetera, to make things simpler. So we've had a lot of development effort on releasing those accessories. We actually received at the AUVSI exponential show this, I can't remember when that was, August?
It was August 17th through 19th. I was just doing our annual UAS Colorado report. And that's one thing, we had a big presence there too, Tom. I remember seeing you and taking a picture.
Yeah, that was great. I just keep thinking it's in May because it's always in April or May. So I was thinking it was May, but I'm like, no, it was this summer.
But you know what, Tom? I think that was the first time you and I met in human form, because we had been working together almost all year. And then it was like, hey, it's Tom, like, and he's a real person. I mean, it was like meeting so many people during COVID for the first time at AUVSI. It was so awesome.
Yeah, it was great to be back at a live show, and it was great to for us to recognize the technical accomplishments of our engineering team, because as you mentioned, our products are super technical.
Yeah.
And they make it look so easy, right? You plug it in and it has a simple operating scheme. But it was recognized by AUVSI at Exponential, so we won first place in the technical excellence for components and sensors. So that was very exciting to be able to recognize our engineers for their hard work that they spent years in developing that.
That's awesome.
We got some more investment in the spring because we recognize, as we're working on these collision avoidance solutions, that we want to go faster because there's a need for it in the marketplace. So we've been hiring like crazy. We've been working on our civil transponder certification. In the middle of that, we had an Air Force contract that we talked about a little while ago. It
Yeah.
started right in December of last year and ended in July of this year, where we successfully proved the low swap ACAS. And then we actually moved our building too. We've been hiring too many people, so we moved into a bigger facility. And so, yeah, lots has been happening in 2021, and I think 2022 is going to be just as exciting.
Well, I mean, your success, Tom, with Sagetech has really paralleled, I'd say, what we're seeing overall in the industry. I mean, I'm really excited to talk with some of our future guests. We've got Miriam McNabb next week from DroneLife, a whole series of industry leaders, as you kind of alluded to, the FAA and NASA at the end of this year, kind of reflecting on the year. But let me just ask you real quick, what would you say from an industry standpoint was kind of maybe, what do you think was the best of, like from just holistically from the industry standpoint?
I think it's hard to say one best of from the industry,
Yeah,
because
sure.
there are so many smart people developing so rapidly so many great technologies, right? All of the vision system processing, the autonomous technologies. I mean, look at now some of the methods of going VTOL, right? Like Shield AI, Martin UAV, everybody who's be able to create very successful hybrid aircraft. So there's just so many technical accelerators in the industry from companies. But I would say the most important thing this year is I think the industry and the FAA have been finally gelling in recognizing how to work together to accelerate the rulemaking and the policies that will enable us to go do the things we want to in the future. We're not there yet, but I think that we joked about it, but the remote ID rule I'll call it the beginning of this year, even though it was right at the end of last year.
Right.
The BV loss arc, the recognition that there are different risk profiles for smaller drones than larger drones, than large aircraft, and therefore aircraft certification. I think we saw a lot of companies get their basis for certification approved this year. So it just feels like from a huge technology leaps, but that will continue to happen in our industry every year because there's a ton of smart people out there. But the policy and regulation advancement in how to integrate UAS into national airspace, I think that's been made remarkable progress this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just in the US, but I'd say globally, and also we talked about this, but just to call it out, the R&D that's been happening, that's enabling, those regulations and standards globally, again, not just in the United States, but, what you're seeing in U-Space and over there in Europe and all kinds of things has been really just fascinating to watch from my perch. In the United States, like the states, literally the state of the states, like you mentioned North Dakota, and I spent some time up there in October, and with the Vantas folks and Grand Sky and Northrop Grumman and UND, and it was just mind blowing the stuff they're doing.
Yeah.
Talk about best of, but looks like we got Carolina in the house. Carolina Air Shots is saying, "Hey, Fly Girl, Dawn and Tom." So thanks, Carolina, for being here. And oh, by the way, Texas is making a big moves this year. We're gonna have Ernest Huffman from the North Central Texas Council of Governments in a couple weeks. So stay tuned for this podcast again for the best of 2021 as we continue rolling out for the end of the year and talking about that this month. But let's before we close here, Tom, tell me what you see for Sagetech on the horizon as we roll into 2022.
2022 is going to be a big year for us because I think there's going to be a lot of progress on the collision avoidance side, right? So we're kind of done with not that we're finished with transponders, but we're done with the military IFF. We're putting the bow on the FAA TSO for the transponder, for the small civil transponder.
Putting a bow on it just in time for the holiday gift wrapping season.
Exactly. And yeah, you can call me up and order it to put in your stocking.
There you go.
But we really working on the collision avoidance now, because also I mentioned the ACAS that we work on is certifiable, and that's what I think is important. I think there's a lot of technologies out there that aren't as certifiable, so we're following in parallel with the rules. And there is an ACAS XU MOPS, so the standards to certify against. So that's for larger fixed wing aircraft. So we're working that. Next year sometime, we expect the SXU, that's for smaller unmanned aircraft that we talked about, the passive. So we're working on that. And then down the road a little bit, but equally as exciting, is XR for rotorcraft. And that'll be the first crewed helicopter TCAS type solution, collision avoidance solution, that's also appropriate for UAM, eVTOL, unmanned or uncrewed aircraft as well. So I think I could throw more on, but my engineers are going to cry uncle. I think for us, it's making progress in multiple fronts on the collision avoidance and the DAA side, while partnered within the ecosystem with exciting companies like Aura Networks, SATCOM providers, with Vantis and North Dakota and New Air in New York and other sites. So a lot of work, because collision avoidance is only one aspect of the whole tech stack required.
Well, boy, I mean, it sounds like you're kind of hitting on all cylinders, the military side, general commercial aviation, rotorcraft, as you said, small drones, large drones, on the commercial side. I mean, your product kind of spans across all of these. And when you think about safety in the national airspace, I mean, we talked about detect and avoid and beyond visual line of sight, but at the end of the day, it comes down to safety, and that's exactly what you're enabling, and that will enable autonomous operations eventually, and of course these scalable, repeatable, beyond visual line of sight, and one-to-many drone operations. So one pilot to many drones. So super exciting, big year for you. Congrats on that AUVSI award and all the success that Sagetech has had this past year. I agree. I think 2022 is going to be a huge year, and I look forward to seeing everything you're doing. We are getting super close to our closing time here, Tom. So I'm going to give you the stage, the floor for the last couple minutes to, whatever you want to talk about to close it out.
Yeah, I'll just touch on what you said. So we started today's conversation, I think, with a little bit about the military. And one thing I didn't mention is that we at Sagetech Avionics are a very values-driven organization. So we have a half dozen values that we list, and literally we have all hands meetings every month, and those values come up in why we've made decisions. Our very first value is safety, and that means that we wear safety glasses if we're using a grinder, right, so that we don't hurt ourselves. But most importantly, it's because we create our solutions to ensure the safety of airspace, and that's what transponders and ADS-B are about. That's what collision avoidance about. That's what our partnerships are about, and redundant systems, et cetera. So I think all of us need to remember that there are certain different risk profiles, but at the same time, drones are airplanes, and they can fall out of the sky and cause damage. So they need to be appropriately safe. And that's what our company focuses on every day, is creating solutions to enable safe integration into airspace.
Well, since we're circling back, I'll say, we started out with your military background, and, just the fact that you have values for your company, not every company does. And I love that you do that. I love that you have 6. I love that safety is number 1. I have values on my website as well. And it's interesting, Tom, because the couple of companies that I've noticed that I've interviewed, for this podcast that have those, usually the CEO has some military background. They drill that into us, but it's so, everybody's got maybe a mission statement, less have a vision statement. I would say fewer have values. So good on you. You guys are living up to those values. And really, like I said, looking forward to seeing what y'all bring to 2022. Going to be a huge year. Thank you so much also for sponsoring this month of the Best of 2021. Really appreciate that. You and I were talking off screen before we went live, the incredible lineup we have coming this month, and just a great way to end the year. So thank you again for that. Really appreciate it.
We're proud and happy to do it, and I'm just as excited to see kind of how you put the bow on the year with all the great speakers and guests and others that you have on your program this month.
Well, thanks so much, Tom, and I think that's all she wrote here. Everybody out there, thank you so much for dialing in. Keep tuning in. By the way, if you missed any back episodes, you want to go back and watch this replay, go to YouTube, DroneLife TV, all of it's up there. And this week, by the way, on Clubhouse, because Tom was, oh, by the way, Tom was on Clubhouse last week, and if you all have been watching me regularly on this podcast, they would say, oh, it was a great Clubhouse, but it's not recorded. Surprise, it is now. And so Tom's recording actually from his Clubhouse appearance is up for replay on Clubhouse. I know his team posted that up on LinkedIn as well. So check it out. Different conversation, equally incredible information. This week, instead of doing Clubhouse on Thursday, we're going to do it Friday. And we're going to have Miri McNabb from DroneLife. She's been an amazing partner with us this year, and has that perspective of providing the news for the whole year. So I can't wait to pick her brain and then have her on this podcast as well next week. So thanks again, Tom. That's all she wrote. Thanks.